Good evening. I'm Ann Hodges, and my connection with KUHT goes all the way back to the station's dedication in 1953. It has been my privilege to follow Channel 8's progress for the last 5 decades. How time flies. Tonight's Houston Remember When will tell you a bit about what's happened over all those years, and many of you watching have contributed in many ways to this essential part of Houston's television history. So this program is a tribute to your efforts, too. Join us in celebrating KUHT 50 golden years.
Got audio and booth.
The pioneer on America's educational television frontier. This is KUHT Channel 8 in Houston.
KUHT, the first educational TV station to go on the air in the United States.
KUHT 50 golden years.
In 1953, KUHT-TV signed on, the first non-commercial educational television station in the country. It was 6 months before the next station signed on. So now let's let a number of Houston television pioneers tell you about how it all started, and to lead off, some thoughts from the host of what was then a brand new network television program, NBC's Today.
Like the many others who welcome KUHT to the channels, let me say welcome to the mushrooming television picture, and welcome in the big sense of the word, because you're pioneering a brand new and complex side of the television picture. It's a new side and an unknown side, pretty much, to television. No one really knows what educational TV can do.
If you think about it, in 1953, people of Houston, Texas had the vision to bring a television station to life that would have an opportunity to serve area communities with education and information and entertainment.
The picture tube was round, and it was about this big. And of course it was a wonder, and we were all just amazed that you could actually send pictures flying through the air, as one old radio guy said. God never meant for man to send pictures flying through the air.
What was this? This was television. I mean, this was new. This was educational television. First educational television station in the United States.
So that other students
You might have thought it would have happened in New York or in Chicago or in one of the major urban areas that was kind of a primary place for commerce or government. But it happened in Houston, Texas.
It goes back to that situation of that great number of students that came to the university after the Korean conflict. Mr. Cullen was a major benefactor of the university. And so they made the approach to him to start the television station.
Mr. Cullen certainly was instrumental with a gift of about $400,000. I think the original cost was about $500,000 to get the station on the air. The fact of the matter was, at that time, they had too many students needing an education and not enough bricks and mortar classroom space to accommodate them.
It was a twofold thing. You could have a communications department, and you could have the students working at the station getting on-job training, if you will.
President Kimmer had gone to Washington, and he hand-carried the application for the Channel 8 allocation to the FCC. And the first application they rejected. Then he sought to get the HISD to join the University of Houston in what they agreed initially would be a 50-50 split of the responsibility and the use of the station.
Frieda Hennick with the FCC was probably the person most responsible for Houston getting on the air earlier than some other folks.
And Frieda Hennick came down here and actually studied the potential for a station down here. And at that time, they brought in as a manager a very dynamic man by the name of John Schwartzwalder. And so the combination of an incoming potential manager like Schwartzwalder plus the real farsightedness, really, of Kimmer, who really saw a future here, they all knew they were in a pioneering venture.
It is with gratitude and the utmost humbleness that I have the honor
Dr. Kemmerer, in accordance with the terms of the Emerson Educational Television Grant, to present you with this check.
Now put a smile. Yes, sir. I do very easily.
Well, I was already here when we started KUHT. I had been hired by the university to finish putting the equipment for an FM station, KUHF, on the 5th floor of the Cullen building.
Well, the thing was that Hugh Roy Cullen, if he decided that he was going to finance a project, he financed it to the hilt. And when they put in that space on 5 and 6, they had all of the cushioning so that the studio itself was free floating.
The walls that were built with carved arches all the way around the studio and very soundproofed. Took all that down then and made a TV studio out of it. And it just broke the hearts of those of us who had been in the radio station and its operation and also as students.
And the Ezekiel Cullen building still is our main administration building, and it is stunning in its detail, as well as being the birthplace of Channel 8.
Channel 2 was the only station on the air in Houston, and there had been a freeze on construction permits for a long time. So there was a backlog of people wanting stations, but we were the first educational to receive a construction permit.
Well, the thing was, it was such a fragile situation. The FM radio stations weren't doing well, and the television mandate was even more difficult because of the enormous expense that any university was looking at. And so the thought was that if Channel 8 had come on the air and failed, then this would have been a truly ominous beginning for educational television.
As the story goes, when they kicked off the programming of the station, my understanding is the transmitter actually was on in test mode in early May of 1953, but toward the end of May, I think the 25th, they were going to have a special ceremony to kind of bring the station to life with programming.
George Arms was standing on the floor in front of the camera watching the floor monitor, and when the image changed from the slide to a picture of himself, he looked at it and he said, "Well, there it is." And that was the first thing that was said on a program on KUHT.
It got its title, It's 5, because it started at 5 o'clock. And that's when we signed on the air.
We went till about maybe 9:30 at night. And that was about all we could handle.
But on the day of the dedication, when we had Commissioner Hennock there was this given time that I theoretically was supposed to turn the transmitter on.
And there's always bugs in the system when you initially turn the things on, and naturally it would happen to us.
We thought we were just set to go, you know, and for some reason it wouldn't turn on. It wouldn't turn on.
Bill Davis, chief engineer at the time, he was really fit to be tied because the pressure was on us to get that thing working.
And all of a sudden he gets angry, he reaches out and kicks the transmitter and everything goes, and hey, we're on the air. So.
Ready scanner, ready booth. Got audio and booth.
The pioneer on America's educational television frontier. This is KUHT Channel 8 in Houston.
A typical day in those days was a little beehive of activity. The students were involved in producing the shows. They were also involved in many cases in starring in the shows. And we were doing homemaking shows. We were doing actual instructional classes on television. We were doing little news segments. We had good people here, Schwarzwalder and Pat Welch and Rick Uray and others who were wonderful, inspirational guys and knew the business as much as anybody could know it at that time.
The KUHT studio is located on the 5th floor of the Ezekiel W. Cullen building on the university's campus. On the 6th floor are the station's film and art departments. As in every other area of operation, faculty and students work hand in hand in the KUHT.
In between shows, sometimes we'd show short films, or else a hostess would come on, maybe for 3 minutes while the set was changed. Small studio like that, very often you only had room for one set. When the program was over, whoever was sitting on a couch had to get up quickly because that couch was going to disappear out the door.
We didn't have much room to work. So there were people in one corner of the building over there rehearsing and getting ready for their show. It was all live. There was no room for error. If you made a mistake, you just made a mistake. So the energy level was extremely high. There are two kinds of people in television, those who've worked in live television and those who haven't. And to a man or to a person who will tell you, if you've had a chance to work in live television, there is something that happens when they say roll them and you're on the air.
It's very, very nice to be back with you again this evening. And I hope that you carefully observed our little skit at the beginning of the program. And by the way, I want to thank Mr. Paul Owen, the program director at KUHT, and Mr. Johnny Bradley for their very excellent presentation of an idea that we're going to be talking about this evening.
Going back to 1953, when the then president of the university came up to me and said, Dr. Evans, we're going to start doing, with our Channel 8, our new station, we want to start doing a course, college course. And he said, we understand that you had some experience at the FM station at Michigan State University before you came here. We'd like you to do this first course. And of course, I wasn't prepared to know what was going to be happening, but this was going to be live. And it ended up by having 18,000 people signing up for it, which was a pretty huge audience.
I came here in the fall of 1955 to teach in the English department. I realized that we had this marvelous outlet here, this television station that covered so many aspects of life nationally, internationally, and locally. And it occurred to me also that there wasn't really very much devoted to the fine arts. So I carried myself over to the station and talked to Dr. John Schwartzwalder and some other people, and I proposed that I do a broadcast on the fine arts in Houston.
Lee Pryor's program was really conversations with the distinguished arts community here in town. He would get really the leadership group of the arts community, and he would have these conversations with them, and they greatly respected him.
I might have a poet on, I might have an architect on, I might have a musician, depending on what was going on in the city at the time. And I think this is why we had some success with the program, because we had a large audience that was interested in the arts, and they responded very favorably to these broadcasts.
The first drama that was ever done on non-commercial television was a drama called Markheim, and written by Robert Louis Stevenson.
I was in radio and TV and drama, and so I sort of lived at the university because there was always something to do. And at the very end of this play that they were doing, there was supposed to be a nun walking in, and all she had to do was cross herself and kneel. And they asked me if I would do it, and I said, sure, I'll do that. And they gave me the go-ahead to walk out, and I was so solemn, and I crossed myself, and as I knelt, my knees went all the way down, and the whole place just erupted, and what can you do?
We had a university forum that I liked, and Dr. Schwarzwalder was the moderator there, and he brought in men from everywhere.
Dr. Schwarzwalder's appearances, you could probably compare to Walter Cronkite. They say he was our Walter Cronkite.
Schwarzwalder's program lasted quite a while, and I think it was quite successful. And he was probably one of the most dynamic moderators of a show you'll ever find, because he was quite sophisticated and did a very good job of drawing out some of these conflicts among the participants.
For a while, there were a number of classes, which we call telecourses, that were taught on television, and they would put TV sets in dormitories and things like that. The University of Houston was kind of hard up for classroom space.
And they were in their early stages of filming things that could be distributed to the rapidly emerging number of television stations that had come after Channel 8.
Now, originally, the science of classification was based almost entirely on comparative morphology and comparative structures.
One particularly effective pioneer at that time was a man by the name of H. Burr Roney, R-O-N-E-Y, who taught biology. And he was a fine, competent scholar.
I remember once he was trying to show how genes would combine even from a random sample, and he had built a gadget that was almost like a little slot machine. And it was a container, looked a little bit like a gumball machine at the top that was full of ping pong balls, black and white. Of course, we cheated. We had little tubes inside covered up by the ping pong balls to where you could stack the deck. You could put the ping pong balls in the order that fit the script.
George Stout was doing records to the piano, and we'd have the camera on the lighted keyboard.
And on each key, there was a light bulb. This went to a keyboard, an actual keyboard that George Stout had, and if he pressed a key on his keyboard, a light would come on the appropriate key on the chart. It seems strange to me that you could teach piano by television, but apparently he was doing it.
Senor Farrington, what are some of the interesting places in Mexico where serapes are made?
Typically, Senora McHenry, the serape of Saltillo is the most famous, particularly with the tourist trade.
My father, Curtis Farrington, as chairman of the Department of Modern and Classical Languages here at the University of Houston, he began with another professor doing the television series on Spanish language and culture. At that time, I had a dance group, and we danced classical Spanish dancing, and we also danced folkloric dancing, Mexican folkloric dancing, for the program when they presented those topics.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Houston Independent School District brings you every regular meeting of the school board through the facilities of KUHT.
There were two things that sold television sets in those days, and that were the wrestling matches and the school board thing, because everybody was interested in seeing in that era. We have to remember what was happening. The desegregation movement was starting. There were a lot of very heated discussions on the school board, and people were interested politically in what was happening.
Well, I do see an occasion.
Even though he didn't.
No.
The information I have presented is a public record from the Un-American Activity Files. It is available to any citizen.
The school boards was probably the most enjoyable or most difficult or whatever it was, when you had to get the cameras out of the studio, put them in the back of a truck, go to the HISD administration building, set up the cameras to do their little bit of activity that they do there, and they were very good actors.
Any questions on these corrections? Not all approved, signify right hand. Opposed, motion carried.
Doing live broadcasts at the school board was very interesting because there was a big battle going on between liberals and conservatives in the school board. And so this produced a number of a surprising large audience.
We are at a meeting of the school board, and we saw signs which contain two misspelled words which are in everyday use in our language.
The audience would say, well, what are they going to do? So they would watch a whole bunch of watches. I mean, I think it was the best show we probably had on. But it was just people being people.
Could we get back on the order of business?
I've had the occasion to observe the youngsters who run this station. And for the most part, all of the details of television operation are conducted by students in the university. To this great staff, to those responsible for the great strides made since May 1953, every citizen joins with me in expressing our sincere appreciation to KUHT for a job well done.
I think the original concept was that the station would go on the air. They would have professors and professors who were teaching courses on television. They would have a lot of films that they would show on television, and the programs themselves would be produced by students. And I'm speaking here of television directing, students operating camera, doing the floor management, giving these students real experience in television production with the idea that then they could go on into commercial television. And that was part of the original concept, all tuned to students, either teaching by television or using students for the production of television.
Television is only the copper wire in the telephone call. It's only the fountain pen itself without a hand to make it move. TV, with all its amazing technical development, is only a media, one of the many, to transmit information. The ideas that can flow over it are the important things. And you'll find a lot of critics who'll needle you about that, and I hope that you'll tell them the short end. Because the art form that is television is infinitely complex and hopeful, and a lot of people will expect you to grow up in 20 minutes. All other art forms had generations to grow up in, hundreds of years. People will expect television to mature, educational as well as commercial, in another week or so. Take it easy, we try to, and good luck, and welcome to the pool.
Yes, a new broadcast concept was being defined in the 1950s, and live TV productions were its mainstay. Next on Houston Remember When, KUHT 50 Golden Years, we'll take a look at what was taking place in a Quonset hut on the other side of the university campus. In those early years, KUHT's film department simply gathered up existing films from around the country to fill in between the station's own live programs. In the years that followed, the film department's first manager, Dr. John Meany, and a team of bright young film directors redefined a department that had its roots in the attic of the University of Houston's Ezekiel Cullen building.
When the station first went on the air, there was no videotape. So anything that we showed other than live in the studio had to be on 16mm film.
We used students for the most part, but we soon started operating on a scale that required additional full-time staff. So eventually I had an opportunity to hire Jim Bauer.
When I came to KUHT in 1956, the film production unit was in the rafters of the Ezekiel Cullen building above the television station. It was in a storage area. Dr. Meany's office was also a darkroom.
Dr. John Meany, who was my boss at the beginning there, he got a grant for some kinescoping equipment. Well, kinescoping was basically pointing a movie camera at a TV screen to record the image,
which was miserable in quality. So when a grant became available for kinescope recording at KUHT, I persuaded the Ford Foundation to let me use it for film equipment rather than kinescope equipment.
John had the ability to say, looky, we will buy the Aircon Super 1200 cameras that have the shutter on them that will allow us to shoot kinescopes, but we will also be able to go out and shoot regular film.
So he, in one step, acquired motion picture production equipment, and we could produce films which could be used on the air. These cameras were capable of recording sound as well as picture.
The president of the University of Houston, Dr. W.W. Kimmerer, was a very imaginative man. He was also far-sighted, so he set aside a part of the University of Houston campus as a television park in which eventually KUHT would be operating, along with, he hoped, a whole cluster of commercial TV studios and transmitters and towers.
11 was about to come in, 13 was going to come in after that. They were going to have them all on the same tower, and they would rent space to these television stations, and then the university could recover cost for operating Channel 8. So this was the grand scheme.
The first entity that was in that building was what was considered the original Channel 39, which was at that time the call letters were KUHT-TV, and they didn't stay on the air too long during that. Then after that, KTRK-TV, Channel 13, came into town, and they signed on, but their first studio was in that same building at 4513 Cullen.
And instead, KPRC, which was in a Quonset building on the other side of town, built their own building. And Channel 11, the CBS affiliate, which was on the top floor of the Prudential building, built their own building over on Buffalo Bayou. And so that concept went aside. So the university at that time decided to go ahead and build a Quonset building for film production because we were getting very busy. We had a lot of projects going, and we had to have the facilities.
Wonder buildings, I think they were called. And we documented it at that time in photography for the Wonder Corporation.
In the process, we had a 40 by 40 studio, 2 editing rooms, a sound mixing room, and a processing room. It was like a whole new life because all of a sudden the processing machine was in the same building we were in. We could hear the processing machine. The printer was in the same building we were in. And so it brought our efficiency up 100%.
Our several interesting discussions so far.
Back in the 1950s, I received a grant from the Ford Foundation with the then General Manager John Meany, and to begin a series of dialogues with all the world's greatest psychologists. We were able to get C.G. Jung, who had never before appeared. So here was the sort of early entry into television back in 1953, led to something which I think has a lot of historical significance. And I think it began to become more and more like a truly professional operation as the years went by.
Well, Susie, you know you can't go on like this.
Look, Mr. Brooks, if my own mother doesn't care, why should you or Mr. Allen? Why don't you just leave me alone?
Because we want to help you.
I was working with the President's Committee on Delinquency and Youth Crime, and I was fortunate to get a grant to do the Greater Houston Action for Youth project, in which, working with Channel 8, I produced 13 different films looking at the delinquency problem in Houston, which, by the way, not only Channel 8, but all the other commercial stations agreed to show. And each one of these shows depicted some aspect of delinquency, followed by a panel discussion.
Down the hill of destruction, Susie made the acquaintance of narcotics, an innocent, indeed comforting and common drug, paregoric.
This is NET. National Educational Television was set up in Ann Arbor as a source for distributing programs for educational television. And you know, you're talking about sending out 16mm prints by bus, train, or whatever, and that was the distribution system.
And Boston and New York and various other stations who later came into the mix were feeding the content. And Houston actually was feeding a lot of content out. We had specialized educational series, Doctors in Space and things of that nature, where the university's faculty were doing education courses, and we would send them out to our colleagues.
When I came to the station, there were 2 projects going on. One was People I Taught to Be Different at TSU that Paul Schlesinger was producing, and this other one was the Doctors in Space series, and it consisted of filming in the old KUHT studios. And we had a university professor that actually did the interviewing of the doctors.
Ever since men first became aware that the moon and the planets are celestial objects, something like the Earth, people have dreamed of visiting other worlds in space.
Well, this all preceded Sputnik. So it was really timely, to say the least, because to look at life on other planets and those kinds of issues was really remarkable.
You see, this is not
a spaceship. The vehicle ascends from the ground, carries people into space. So the vehicle re-enters the atmosphere and then gradually turns from a spaceship into a hypersonic glider and descends.
In those days, you directed and you operated the camera. The close call with the series was then also the director had the responsibility of editing the work print, had the responsibility of developing the film too.
Dr. Struble, good day, Dr. Ida. How do you do, sir? I wonder if you could tell us what the space pilot is wearing.
And they had a military expert, and so they could use this encyclopedia of expertise, and did, in writing these scripts and in producing this 12-part series.
Well, the next thing was a film series involving Texas Southern University, which was really in our backyard, just down the street from the University of Houston. They had a sociologist on the faculty there named Dr. Henry Allen Bullock.
He believed that people are taught to be different. People are not born different. And the way he saw this was that he wanted to trace the development, human development, of a series of groups from birth to death to illustrate that point.
People are taught to be different. For each group tailors the human being to suit the designs of its own culture. Where cultures differ, people are made to differ too.
I worked with Dr. Bullock to develop the script, and the script was based on intensive research about the various cultures that would be included in the filming. The film opened, of course, with a musical backdrop along with the dancers.
Many American parents meet these patterns of aggression by using identical treatment. Identity of dress and toy possessions is an obvious sign of this method. In toys, the method sometimes backfires, for both children often want the same object.
There was relatively few black programs of any kind on television at that time. In fact, I don't think there were any black students at the University of Houston in the 1950s.
His drives in this direction are definitely blocked.
Dr. Bullock believed that dance could be used as a means of teaching rather than as a means of entertainment only. And so he talked with Dr. Marjorie Stewart, who was with the dance department at the time, and asked her to join him in this effort.
The KUHT crew was very enthusiastic. We had an art director named George Collins, a gung-ho kind of guy who could get a crew of student assistants together in a little while and do a tremendous amount of work. We filmed this series in their auditorium using our crews to set up scenery and cameras and so on, and using the art department of Texas Southern to design the sets.
And so Dr. Nicholas Guerin, then head of the Department of Music at Texas Southern University, along with Professor Jack Bradley, developed the music for the 12-part series. Dr. John Biggers and Joe Mack developed the set designs. We began to work with a director here called Paul Schlesinger.
Paul was perfectly contented for me to be director of Doctors in Space and to say, hey, shoot the close-up and etc. Just as I was very contented to be his camera person for People Are Taught to Be Different.
That was in the air at the University of Houston at the time. This commitment of personal time to the work to be done was enormous. People even donated some of their own equipment to help out. We had a student assistant named Pat Coakley. He used to transport us around with our cameras and film in his own Volkswagen bus.
We have attempted in this series to portray the development of personality as it occurs in different parts of the world, in the hope that the interests of intercultural understanding have been served.
I will never forget that series, People Are Taught to Be Different. It had a meaning to it that has stayed with me, and an acceptance of different lifestyles and different ways that people are taught to be different.
Of course, here with me today is Governor Ramsey, who presides over the Senate, and I'll tell you frankly, without his help, I don't think we would be standing here today.
The legislature has given the people of Houston the upper Gulf Coast and southeast Texas an opportunity to make a first-class university, one of the best in the South.
It was during the Barthold administration, however, that Channel 8 made that transition, not only from private schools to a state school, and he had to endure that, but also the transition from a local station, because remember the transmitter was right here on campus. It was really quite local. It was 20, 30 miles from that transmitter tower. But he got the Elvin site in his administration. So once he got the Elvin site, then Channel 8 became a regional station.
During Barthold's time, we started becoming much more involved in that transition between educational television and public television. We were producing programs for Channel 13 at that time. We were right next door. They operated a commercial station, and we did a lot of things with them.
This is mute night in the city of Expedition Houston. Owls turn on their eyes, and a whole new population rises up out of daybeds and takes on the dark mantle of night to do its own work, to cast its own sorcery in the magical city of Expedition Houston.
I remember a series of programs that we produced, and it was what people do from, say, 7 o'clock until 6 o'clock in the morning in Houston.
Out on the streets, it is lonely in the big city. Where are the millions of people who inhabit it by day? They've gone to their rest now. It is the hour of the owl, the earthworm, and the cockroach.
Roy Barthold was the survival manager of the 1960s. And he would go after all of the little grants and big ones and anything he thought he could possibly get to catch money to keep the station alive.
There was always the feeling that film was the ultimate media. And we were driven because of the financial aspects of it. And in many respects, the first thing that happened to start changing things was color television. And we couldn't afford color film.
Boom, boom, boom. With the silk umbrella and the handle of a broom. Boom-a-lay, 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 boom.
It was kind of intriguing, and in the back of my mind, I looked at it, I said, well, here we are. We're now the best black and white station in Houston, but unfortunately all the other stations were going to color.
The changeover from the private school to the state institution, the way that it impacted Channel 8 was that the legislature had already passed a law where you couldn't give money, tax dollars, directly to a broadcasting facility. And so that meant that Channel 8, which had been, as a private school, conducting its various types of appreciation and instructional classes, would not get any money for these instructional classes. And within a year, those classes were all terminated.
From the Music Hall in Houston, Texas, NET, National Educational Television, brings you the Houston Symphony Orchestra under its conductor-in-chief, Sir John Barbarotti.
We could see it coming. WNET was moving to the forefront of television production and really kind of overriding what was happening at Ann Arbor. And we could sense that we were moving from the educational television to the public television mode.
Well, here we are in a little different setting. This is the videotape room at KUHT. And this, our videotape recorder, is recording the sound of my voice in the picture that you see right at this moment.
After this short break, KUHT moves into the era of public broadcasting in color. We'll be right back. As TV's black and white era ended, KUHT had many challenges to overcome. Lest this great experiment in non-commercial broadcasting would have come to an end, along with the coming of color. Financing was at the heart of this equation. In this segment, we will see how the Houston community was given the opportunity to help and to become an integral part of public television in new and often creative ways.
Roy Barthold was going to stay the course until he could see a better day. And I would say that's really to me, that's what Roy did. No matter how bad things got, he managed to keep everybody happy enough to keep the place going.
Mr. Barthol said, well, we're going to have a fundraiser of some kind. And since we had practically no budget for promotion, I came up with the idea of a simple penny postcard mailing to as many people as we could find to make a mailing list. And I think the amount we hoped we would get and mentioned was just $10 a person.
It was productive in that it was the beginning of fundraising programs for the station. In our efforts to get some money to keep the station moving.
And we had what we call I Love Channel 8 week, and we did every kind of promotion we could think of at that time. We had billboards, we had the week declared by the mayor, Louis Welch, and we had pictures of children and celebrities and people in I Love Channel 8 sweatshirts. It was the first effort to get the people in the community in Houston to help support their PBS station.
I became station manager very, very late 1969. Dr. Hoffman was president of the university at that time. Enlisted Dorothy Sinclair, who was the in-school person, to start working on the idea of forming a non-profit association.
Pat Nicholson took over as the director of the Radio Television Film Center. However, he and President Hoffman and Roy all got together and did come up with the ACT idea at the end of the 1960s, and that then brought real money to the station.
KUHT needed a friends group, a community support organization, and they formed ACT, the Association for Community Television. And Marty may not have been its first president or chairman, but she started the auction part of it.
They said, well, I could be the special events chairman. And I said, what's the special events chairman do? And they said, well, if Julia Child comes, you'll have a little something, or if Mr. Rogers comes. I figured neither of them are going to be coming, so I said, all right, I'll do it. Then I found out what they had in mind was a giant auction, and I was going to be the chairman. Well, that was some special event.
Marty Levine was probably the rock that ACT was built on, among other people, of course, but Marty worked very hard. I would say that Marty's life was ACT and Channel 8. Marty started the auction, laid the groundwork for all of us who followed.
The first year of the auction was like, what is this? The people in Houston were not aware of a TV auctions, especially on a public television station. But the concern from the ACT, people at ACT and also at the station, was that we were not receiving donations that would be adequate to handle a whole week's of auction.
The first auctions were mayhem, absolutely mayhem. We all were kind of feeling our way through how you did this. We would come down here at 6 o'clock at night and be on the air.
Sunday, we went on the air that afternoon and did the auction for that first day and into the evening. By the next morning, bright and early, there were people from the community that were coming up with items to donate, literally handing them down, setting them outside and leaving without any documentation as to who donated it or whether.
We're going to give this to the highest bidder, and we want to see it start right now. We want to get this thing up in the air in a hurry. And it says, best wishes, Mickey Mantle.
The auction was a 10-day, just a big, big event. Involved hundreds and hundreds of volunteers. Before the auction, the whole year, women were going out, mostly women, going out and getting auction items, and they were called go-getters.
There were a lot of people behind the scenes who put forth a tremendous amount of effort in helping to put the thing together. And we spent a lot of time shooting what we would call bonanza pieces ahead of time.
One of the girls in the production department asked me if they got a little German outfit, would I do a Volkswagen spot? And I said, sure.
From far across the blue water to Houston comes a brand new Al Stokes Volkswagen, Made in Germany.
They had me dancing through the trees in the back and going around in the front, and then they pulled the Volkswagen away, and I cried, you know. But it went over big. It was funny.
Do we close out the quickie board here? Can somebody tell me if we close out the quickie board? Are we closing out the quickie board? Someone point to me. Hello? Oh, here we are. Okay, I found me. Now, do we close out the quickie board?
It was live television. It was largely unscripted. It was largely non-professional talent. In the beginning, it was with the tube-type color cameras that were unstable. So you were covering a set the size of the entire studio with 2 cameras.
And here's daily special 11. And it's Mary Fayway, and she is totally unauctionable.
The first time that I was ever assigned to work at an auction, I was working a floor producer, which entailed running around on a headset on a wire, trying to get the floor, get the table captain up to his table to make sure the merchandise was there, and then, troubleshooting between the production control room upstairs. And I didn't know what I was doing, but it worked.
And there was hot and heavy bidding on dinner with Maxine and Emil Messenger, and of course
that length of live broadcasting was something a bit different for us to handle, but it was something that I'm not sure you could plan for. It's something you experience.
Yes, I believe that right now, arriving in the rear of our studio, are our guests.
But the early days were fun. We had a lot of people from the community who came in and did work for us. Almost all the stations sent their announcers and their disc jockeys in, and they were our auctioneers.
And you can be a hometown hero, going public all the way. And everyone around will hail you for supporting Channel 8.
You know, those last auctions, we were up around the $1 million mark in what we were taking in. But, it became clear to both me and to Jim Bauer that we're giving up 90 hours of airtime to put this auction on. We're spending a huge amount of time and effort, and we just decided that wasn't really any longer the most productive way to do it.
But as we got down to our last 3 years, I had the pleasure of actually producing our clothes for auction each year. That's when I actually had a chance to say I did a piece from beginning to end, thought how it's going to fit together, music, what type of shots I needed, and then actually put the pieces together. And it was fun.
It was a wonderful opportunity to reach out into the community, to organizations, to companies, to individuals, and to touch them, as it were, in asking them to help contribute to the station's well-being.
We started having a lot of community input when the ACT organization was founded. We started the membership campaigns.
We can make public television better and better for the whole Gulf Coast community.
I guess my first my impression would be that it was one of the few times that I've heard really dead silence in the studio. But it just took a while for it to get started.
I have the pleasure of introducing a very special volunteer and a special friend of mine, Jane Kendall, who has a special message for you. Janie?
As a concerned parent, I'm very much aware of the time that our children spend watching television and what kind of program that they watch.
We have a studio full of people, usually from a company or an organization, and we try to make it fun for them. And the guys like me act like fools, and when we're not on the air, try to keep people enthused and excited.
One of the times that really stands out was when we had Violet. Now, Violet was a little hand puppet, and Tedges Inglesmith did Violet. And we had a set where we had a cutout of Snuffleupagus, and I stood in front of the cutout, and Violet came up over the back of Snuffleupagus. I never knew what Violet was going to say because it was all ad-lib.
We have some other people here visiting us. Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! What is that? Help! I don't know what happened. That is the wildest party I've ever been to.
We had people come out and sit on a telephone bank and take volunteer contributions.
I'm up here in the phone banks and having a very nice time with Tim Roseborough. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you.
And why is it that Tenneco volunteers come and do what you're doing tonight?
Because they love it. First of all, they love volunteering, and secondly, because they're very supportive of KUHT.
These were people that had worked all day, and now they were coming to the station to help us. And it was just an awesome revelation that the community would respond to what we were trying to do in this manner.
Well, Jim Bauer was actually a fairly hands-on station manager. Now, you have to understand, when I came on board, a lot of his actual production experience was in film. He was just getting into videotape himself. Obviously, as the station grew and as we got more producers and directors and crew people, his job evolved.
So I'd come up and see Jim, and we'd have these long philosophical conversations about how the world was going, and you know, how film was doing and how sprocket holes worked and all that sort of thing. So eventually he brought me on board as the senior producer.
Bob specialized in doing documentary type work, and over the years produced actually quite a bit, about half-hour and hour-long documentaries on a wide variety of topics and subjects.
Cast iron building fronts, the brick, stone, and timbers of the architectural finery arrived in the holds of sailing ships.
I was up in New York, and I pulled the book down from Dominique's library, and it says The Galveston Was by Howard Barnstone. I said, oh, this is a good idea for a film. So that's where the Galveston, the Gilded Age of the Old Nile started, and made the first national release documentary that had come out of KUHT in all times.
A showplace.
At the time that Jim Bauer put me in charge of the production department, he asked me how was I going to deal with this fact that we had two formats in-house. And as far as I was concerned, it was two formats. There are some projects that are better suited to be shot on film, and there are some projects that are better suited to be shot on video. That's the way we started out.
And I'm an idea person. I really have never known much about it technically, how to operate a board, or, you know, I can't do any of that. Push a camera, I don't know. I don't know where to plug them in. I don't know how to wind them up. I don't know. But I have ideas, and I have practical ideas.
Liz Catterley, who did all these art programs, television programs for Channel 8, got chatting with Ben Stevenson, then the director of the Houston Ballet, artistic director. He'd been to China and was going back again, and Liz said to Ben, wow, what a great idea for a film.
That was the first year that China had opened. We went the second year. We were the second film crew in China.
I find the students are very keen. They're not stuck into their Russian training at all. The openness of the teachers and the students is wonderful.
We did have a good production schedule where we were given 5 weeks to do the work we needed to do in Beijing and then also in Shanghai.
Pas de Deux, A Dance of Two Countries, which was a wonderful title because that's exactly what it was.
The Green Room, a weekly preview of the arts in the Houston area. Your host, Bill Hardy.
The Green Room was the concept of a producer here at Channel 8 named Elizabeth Catterley, Liz Catterley. And the program started, I believe, in 1976. The host was a friend of mine, an actor who had been many, many years at the Alley Theater, Bill Hardy.
I know you told the story many times. Could you tell us briefly why an Alley Theater? I mean, who needed it? Why do it?
I had designed this set, so I decided to bathe it in green light and green furniture and green. was very green. But Bill was a very handsome guy, and he came across very well.
And after a couple of years, Bill left, and Liz was looking around for a new host for the program. And I was looking around for something else to occupy my time, and this was a perfect match.
Did you know from the beginning of your studies that you would be a mime rather than an actor or a dancer, let us say?
I wanted to be an actor, and I became a mime because I think I was a mime in the womb of my mother.
That was the beauty of Jim Bernhardt, that he came along and he had the knowledge, he had the background, he had the wit.
With us now is Delia Stewart, the artistic director of the Delia Stewart Jazz Dance Company. Who has
He was excellent at what he did.
With a number of firsts for you.
Well, I would say the main important first for us is going for 3 days at the Tower Theatre.
Green Room really helped build growth in the arts community because I think that people felt they knew someone. They knew us personally, and then it was easy for them to go to the shows. We were able to tell people who might never have had any idea that they would like to go to the ballet or the opera or the Museum of Fine Arts.
Sunshine on my shoulder.
There was a time at the stage where we did another one of those kind of transitions, if you will, and went to quite a number of live programs.
Hello everyone, I'm Margaret Ford. Well, what is right and what is wrong in the state of Texas?
Great pleasure today to be sitting with Donald Barthelme, the writer.
From Houston, Texas, Handel's oratorio, Messiah, a complete Baroque rendition.
Every day there was something to do. There was always a production going on. They may not have been very production intense, but there were a wide variety of productions that we participated in, and we covered quite the spectrum in terms of providing something for a broad base of the communities.
This is The Edge.
When I first walked through the door at Channel 8, the territory had been going for a couple of years. And at that point, it was a project of the Southwest Alternate Media Project, which was shepherded or overseen by a local filmmaker named James Blue and Ed Hugetts.
This is The Territory.
Why, for instance, on one side of this freeway were big modern buildings, and on the other side there were dilapidated pawn shops in a rundown neighborhood. I decided that if I was to find out about forces, this was a good place to start.
I think James Blue's major contribution to the territory was probably the production that he did himself called the Who Killed the Fourth War. James was a person who came from a tradition that was very kind of local in its origin.
I looked at this beautiful city that we live in, and I saw a lot of things that I didn't understand, and I felt that I was then very well equipped to try to find out, because I had all the questions and none of the answers.
Because in those days there was no video to speak of, and to share the accomplishments and the talents of these people and give them a venue by which they could be exposed to a wider audience. And they fought long and hard for it.
I think that one of the things that's helped the territory is that it's evolved. It has not been a static thing. It has changed with the people who have taken it on, who've been passionate about it.
And through his efforts, not only as an independent filmmaker, but also as a member of the Rice Media Center, was able to help champion the territory, which I believe is the longest running public television series to this day.
In Part 4 of KUHT 50 Golden Years, Channel 8 will lay the foundation for the digital age. Stay tuned. And now comes the story of how friendship helped Houston PBS meet the technical challenges of the next generation of television, digital TV. But technology in any form only serves to support KUHT's unchanging commitment to community programming, and that commitment can extend to serious issues that hide in the darkest corners of this city.
This program contains sexually explicit language and emotional outbursts which KUHT believes necessary to understand the sensitive and complex subject of child molesters.
There was a 4-person team working on Child at Risk, and Mark Scheibel was a Channel 8 staff director who had computer expertise before anybody did up here.
20 years ago, society began to acknowledge the prevalence of adult rape. Throughout the 70s, startling facts about physical child abuse forced the public to take notice.
Dan Grothaus, who was an investigative reporter of the Houston Chronicle at the time, who came and approached Mim Korshak about this sort of activity that was taking place in the Westheimer area in the Montrose.
But just how isolated is the problem? To what extent is the child at risk here in Houston?
Child at Risk was a memorable one because it got a national Emmy. And it got a national Emmy because it was the first program that had made public the incidence of pedophiles and pornographers going to the internet or using the internet to make contact with children. And as a result of that, the first piece of federal legislation was written and passed as a result of our program.
The child needs to know why an adult needed to do that. Why did it happen? Because the child will assign responsibility for that act happening to themselves.
It was a very powerful program for its time, and I think it's held up well through the years.
Arts Alive was a name that I came up with. I like alliteration, and the scene here in Houston, the art scene at the time was vital. It was productive. There was a heck of a lot going on.
We were always open to freelance people coming in with ideas and working with them on it and bringing them into the organization on a contract basis.
Community orchestras, the strength is that people come because they want to play with you. They want to be with you. They want to participate.
There was no voice for the arts who would, and in Houston at the time, it was really a vital art scene, and they deserved to have something on television.
No! I want you to chew out the words.
I came specifically from the arts, and I knew how to be in those spaces. And so I went in. I was given permission, and I went in, and that was the first of the series of Arts Alive productions, the making of the representative for Planet 8.
It's like 18, please. There is no.
It covered every single aspect of what goes into an opera. And you know, we went from the design, direction, stage work, everything was covered, right into the final production, and then we didn't cover performance. We went into the opening, and I believe it ended there. It was continual collaboration, and that's how these productions come about.
Do you really think that all the town meetings in the world that we're going to get people to stay married again?
Well, we've got to emphasize that at every level of existence, that in fact this whole situation of no-fault divorce has crashed us asunder.
When I got here in the early 90s, we were doing a lot of productions that dealt with different aspects of the needs and interests of the community. There was Community, which was in the schedule year-round. Ann Leifesty did that one for us.
Well, that's our outing for today. Hope you enjoyed it.
We had JD's Journals, delightful segments that John Davenport produced for us. We were also doing an awful lot of public affairs, like the town meetings, Ryan's Roundtable with Pat Ryan during the political season.
Good evening, I'm J.D. Houston.
And I'm Patricia Gross. Natural gas producers are...
And certainly Almanac with J.D. Houston and Patty Gross.
I think J.D. and I made a great team because we came from different angles, and it was kind of fun watching public officials squirm a bit because we had different ways of interviewing.
Natural gas like HL&P to come in and maybe artificially or unfairly manipulate, you know, the prices in order to to work it to their best advantage?
Well, JD, I think that's one of the big concerns.
I remember how the politicians and the public officials enjoyed coming to Almanac because it was their chance to get the word out, but also that they knew it wasn't that easy to get away with the spiels that they were used to in other programs, because they had more time, and we had more time to ask the hard questions.
Higher education is the focus of today's Capitol Report. I'm Doris Childress, and joining me are Representative Irma Granhel of House District 35 and Senator Teal Bivens of Senate District 31. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you. When I was going to college, the only thing I could see was being a news anchor, you know, getting the hard news. You know, I was going to be a female Walter Cronkite. But by fate, I ended up here at PBS, and it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because while I was telling the stories of other people's lives, my life was continually developing and being enriched by their lives and by the people that I worked with.
I came out of this experience with a feeling of finding myself through art and expressing myself.
First of all, we wanted to know, what was your initial reaction to Habitat before actually signing on?
Well, I didn't know much about it. I had some Habitat volunteers.
One of the gifts, I think, here at Channel 8 PBS is that stories that you wouldn't be allowed to do in commercial news, you can do here because you have the time. We can find out what's the story behind the story. It's not just the that's it. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Doris Childress.
And I'm Ernie Manous. The show that I was hired to come on to was Weeknight Edition, and it had started, as I understood it, in the fall before.
Nobody freeloads around here. Everybody has to do some work. You bet. You're going to do some work, sir.
Then Ernie came in like gangbusters. I mean, just really ready to rock and roll, doing things that we hadn't even planned on doing. Ernie was really gung-ho about getting in celebrities, really making a true connection with the community outside of just doing the stories.
I look around, I see a lot of people who aren't in what you would think is prime biking shape, and yet they're going, and they're passing me on the road, and they're going along, and you think, how in the world are these people doing it? And I think that the thing has to be that they believe so much in what they're doing. The nice thing about Weeknight Edition and Weekday is the freedom to break from format. So if you had done something that you wanted to do, if Patty had done a complete documentary on something, had I done a half-hour interview with someone, had we done a special program on certain entertainment aspect, had Doris done something educational, we could break from the standard format and actually show that in the course of our show.
We try to make sure that we represent everyone and that we have issues that interest the community. I mean, we are visual storytellers, and I think that's the direction that we're going in, telling the best story.
Well, one of the great things about being director of programming is the opportunity to work with really talented people to bring some terrific projects forward, things like A Love of the Game, the history of baseball in Houston, and the Ranchers, Honor Squadrons,
Captain McNally,
Texas Rangers, In Search of LaSalle.
BB has been performing almost continuously.
Live at the Woodlands gave us a chance to work with Lyle Lovett.
BB King's in town.
All of these programs gave us a chance to reflect the culture and interest of the Houston community.
But don't let nobody play me cheap. I got 50 more that I'm gonna keep. Let the good time grow.
I think there's been several highlights. I think certainly, obviously, one of our big ones was getting into our new facility. Which, of course, my predecessor, Jeff Clark, was extremely instrumental in bringing about.
From the beginning, it really was an opportunity to look at how could we engage the station more in what the community was involved in.
I remember the first time that Leroy and I went to the studio, and he and Jeff had made an appointment. So when we went in, Leroy was a very neat. Everything was squared off. Everything had to be very neat. Well, of course, when we went in the studio, the wires were everywhere, and things were upside down, and Jeff was trying to make a path through there. And Leroy said, "My goodness, Jeff, what a mess." Well, he didn't know it, but that got him. Jeff had him then. And he said, "Well, maybe you'd like to help us straighten it out." So he and Jeff got to talking about it and what we would give. And that started a really great friendship.
One more tug will do it. There we are. Hey.
Leroy and Lucille Melcher are just incredible people. They're stalwart U of H fans. They do a lot in the community, and they've gained what they had by hard work and perseverance.
Well, when I think of Channel 8, I think of Jeff Clark. I think that he was the motivating force. I think he's a man of vision. And I think that we were privileged to watch Jeff and to enjoy and know what he was leading to. He wanted the very best TV station possible.
Building a tremendous building and facility like this takes financial support, and Leroy and Lucille Melcher were the first ones to step up to the plate with really a milestone donation for us.
But it was the fact that once we had the building in place, we could deliver new kinds of services, new kinds of content, new opportunities for the people who watched or listened to what we brought to them.
The mission, and I think it's very succinct, and I think that it's right on the nose, is that the station is here to inform and entertain and educate the people of Southeast Texas. And I think for the most part it's what we strive to achieve. Whether we're successful or not is up to the viewer, I suppose. That's what public television should stand for, and I think that's what we try to do.
Well, since I've been at Houston PBS, I think there's been several highlights. Certainly programmatically, I think the project that we did with the International Space Station.
The story of its design and construction is an epic one.
Well, Space Station was our first international co-production, and partnerships were very valuable to us. Working with Tony Burden on the medical specials, for example, To Heal a Heart and Laser Vision. Brother, Can You Spare $1 Billion? The Jesse H. Jones story was a collaboration with Steven Fenberg and Eric Stange out of Boston. And certainly Mary Lou's Flip Flop Shop was a new direction for us in children's programming, and A Maestro's Farewell also broke new ground for us.
And now, after 11 years as its music director, Christoph Eschenbach is saying goodbye to the Houston Symphony.
The Maestro's Farewell was an HD project out of Jones Hall as well, which I think is very important because it was one of the first remote HD productions shot in Houston, Texas. That's historic. We did it. I think that's important.
The legacy of public broadcasting really does rest with all of us, and especially those of us here in Houston, I think, because the beginnings of public broadcasting were here in this city. And it is a responsibility that we certainly take very seriously in furthering the value of public broadcasting, not only across the country, but especially here in our Houston community.
There's so many stories you hear from people that tell you that you are helping to bring something good into their lives. And I think that's why most of us stay in public television, because they feel it is worthwhile and that it is of benefit to our community.
I take a great deal of pride in having been associated with Channel 8, the first educational station, and all of the joys, the happiness, and the hardships and the heartaches that we suffered in trying to make the station grow and keep it on the air and do things that would be of interest to the community.
And I remember the energy and the fun that for the rest of my life, it'll always be indelibly stamped to my brain, the good times I had here and the knowledge that I gained that I was able to use the rest of my life.
The whole time I was here, but especially building the station, getting on the air, getting this Channel 8 up and the signal out, that was the best of times. I don't see how it could have gotten better.
That's intriguing to think that those of us, especially in my era, loved it so much that we continued on in some capacity in some areas, whether it's in Houston or whether it was in some other place. But it was really very fun and interesting and exciting.
The people
that I worked with were superb. The opportunities for creativity were wonderful, and efforts were appreciated.
The people that I worked with at KUHT, staff and volunteers, were just magnificent people, just amazingly magnificent people. And they made the success. I didn't make the success, they made the success.
I'm very proud of KUHT, and I had a great deal of gratitude for being able to have the opportunity to work for it. It's come a long, long way. I think it's just the best PBS station on the map.
Houston PBS enjoys a special place in the history of broadcasting and within the Houston community that it serves. It has struggled, it has achieved, and all along, the people who have worked or volunteered here have given their best efforts as the station moved along its path to the present. I believe that it was a worthwhile journey. I'm sure you do as well. I'm Ann Hodges, and thank you for joining us.